Hello and welcome back to Erik Bank. Our next company is Björn Borg, and we are joined today by CEO Henrik Bunge, and we're looking forward to a very exciting presentation. Welcome, Henrik.
Thank you, Hjalmar. Okay, guys, I hope you're ready so we can, fire away. This will be an exciting half hour. I can promise you that. All good things starts with a great movie, so just lean back and relax, and I'll show you a few things that we do at Björn Borg.
Anyone who turns up to work early on Fridays at Björn Borg might end up getting fired.
Swedish clothing giant Björn Borg is at the front with this idea. Their Exercise Friday program is what we're talking about. It mandates all their employees to gather at a nearby gym for a weekly workout.
This is the boss.
So that's really the reason. Make people better.
It's something that actually gives energy. Jättebra.
È fantastico, un'iniziativa bellissima.
Super initiative. It's fun to work out and to be able to put it into your day.
Si fa attività fisica almeno una volta a settimana.
There is, of course, probably a million different ways to build a strong brand. At Björn Borg, we believe that building something strong requires that you build it from within. You take an inside-out perspective. It means simply that we want to live our own brand. So do first, and then let the world know what you're doing. For us, it means that everyone working for Björn Borg is a Björn Borg ambassador. And it really starts with enabling all of us to become our own best version before we should tell anyone else to follow. So the approach is a bit to lead the way. If we want you to train so you can become better, well, of course, we need to train ourselves as well. And building a brand in 2021, we believe, is all about being authentic, being engaging, and being transparent. We also believe that you need to look upon your brand as if the brand is an individual. Meaning that when the corporate brand values are exactly the same as the external brand values, that's when you can build something that is very, very strong and that is very, very real. So with that said, of course, last year has been a challenging year. That's very, very clear. And the pandemic sort of forced upon us a completely new reality. And even though our social media push and our online attack started way before the pandemic, things really sort of happened much, much, much quicker during the last probably 10, 11 to 12 months. And one thing that really emerged is our idea of moving this colorful underwear brand, sold predominantly in department stores, into a relevant sports fashion brand sold in online platforms, really sort of exploded. And when we look around us, we can see that there's a number of different trends emerging at the back of this pandemic. And of course, one is a massive online growth. But one that is much more important is the insight to take care of yourself. What can I do so I can live longer and be stronger? What can I do so I can unleash my own potential? And ultimately, what we believe when building a strong brand is that you need to give something that no one else is giving. And there is a window in the market that is open currently for a brand that doesn't talk about training and performance for those that wants to win Olympic gold medals, or for those that will run the Stockholm Marathon in 2:32. We believe that the world needs a sports brand that inspires you, that are working out 2-3 times a week. Sometimes you might go playing paddle if you can find time. Sometimes you might go running. Sometimes you must just take a walk. We want to reach out to those that are training because they want to be better at something else. Living longer, or perhaps just be a better father. That's where the potential is. And that's really our ambition. So looking ahead, of course, we are on this route to create the #1 sports fashion brand for the entire world. So of course, a very ambitious target. It's also clear if you have ambition targets, and if you're reaching really, really high, you need to have a relevant plan. And here, of course, there's a number of things that you need to have in place. One is a strong brand message, something that you want to tell, a story that is worth telling. And we have that with the whole idea of Train to Live. So I'm sure that you thought about this as well. Harder, better, faster, stronger. That's what we've been taught. But how come no one ever taught us why? So at Björn Borg, we love to train. Not to become the world champion of whatever, but to become the best version of ourselves. Because we don't live to train, we train to live. That's the message that we want to bring across. But having a strong message, of course, is not good enough. You also need to know where you want to bring that story across. And it's very clear that that has changed dramatically over the last couple of years and really sort of boomed the last year. So when we look at our consumer intel and ask consumers, how do we need to communicate to be relevant? A number of trends is sort of popping up. So in our latest survey, 71% of the consumers said, if I had a good social media experience with a brand, I'm much more likely to recommend that to others. 49% of consumers say that they depend on influencer recommendations to help with purchasing decisions. And 92% of people trust recommendations from individuals over brands. So it's clear you no longer follow brands, you follow other individuals that perhaps tells the story of the brand. And that's what we want to capture. So how do we enable people around us to tell our story? And of course, one thing is to do a compulsory sports hour. So not only us, but also all the journalists that visiting us are telling that story to others, so it can spread. So it can create a strong brand, a brand that people would want to be a part of. It's also clear that 85% of all users say that influencer content is much more influential when buying stuff than actually looking at brand-generated content. So of course, that tells us that you need to have a strong message, but even more important is that who is the one telling that? Who is the one bringing that across? And I'm not sure, but at least when I look at my 16-year-old son at home, if I would have told him what jeans to wear, he's simply looking at me like I'm an idiot. He would never listen to me when it comes to jeans recommendations, but rather he would listen to his friend, perhaps the coolest guy in school, or most likely someone on a social platform. I'm not sure about your kids, but the second most spent activity next to sleep is looking at their phone. That's where their reality is. And of course, that's where you need to be if you want to build a strong brand. And in essence, of course, I think you recognize this as well. If all you do is talk about yourself, there just won't be a second date. So you need to have others bring across your story. And that is what influencer marketing is all about. So our approach to that has been to have a four-tiered segments where we have different influencers, different ambassadors doing different things. And on top of that pyramid, of course, we have global ambassadors. And unfortunately, we are still a small brand, so we only have one in Joel Kinnaman, mostly because they're very expensive. But also because the purpose of having them is really to create awareness, but also for us to open up doors towards our wholesale partners, and actually less perhaps to sell products or convert into sales. So you need to have other influencers as well. And the second tier for us is local ambassadors. And that's the ones that we have sort of long-term partnerships with. They really like the brand, they really buy into our story, and we really believe that they have the capabilities of bringing our story across in a very credible way. And then, of course, we have seasonal influencers. When we're doing a seasonal campaign, when we want to push a certain product, then we need to look for those that are best suited to give that product a lift. And then, of course, we also have a massive amount of people that are testing our stuff, that are using our things, and also, of course, driving awareness. And the key here, of course, is to understand, what does these different influencers do for you? And how do you measure that progress, that success, so you know where to invest? And also, of course, you need to look upon them in a very different kind of shape. So, for example, Joel Kinnaman, of course, here, it's all about pre-planning. And as you can see from the images, they're all very nice. It's in a set studio, it's well planned, we know exactly which products. It's not very authentic, it's not very real actually, but it works for us. Because of course, this is the stuff that you can see then on the shop floor at NK or Selfridges, or that we can use on our own online. And that's super, super relevant, of course, as well. And on top of that, of course, we can use then Joel Kinnaman's own channels. Currently more than 1 million are following his own Instagram, for example. And of course, we can take a part of that audience as well to spread our message. And in picking those global ambassadors, of course, you need to be very careful. So of course, when we did that, we actually took Joel Kinnaman's picture, we sent that out in all our mature markets, and then we had the consumers to describe him with a couple of words. And then we looked at those words, and then we said, okay, what do we want the consumers to describe our brand with? And here, of course, we saw a high correlation. That's when we decided that Joel is probably right for us, because he really likes what we're doing, and we like him a lot as well. That's really a win-win. He's also really telling the story around being the best version of himself. And if you just look at his Instagram this morning, you can see that he's wearing our tennis collection, playing tennis with his wife, which is also absolutely fantastic. But we need more, of course, and Instagram and influencers is also a numbers game. So we have many, many, many more that, of course, is also doing their own thing, creating their own content with our products. Of course, it's not as perfect sometimes, and perhaps sometimes it's even better, actually. It's not as planned, but it's much more authentic, it's much more real, and it's much more transparent. And of course, here, we've done some extraordinary things at the first 3-4 months of this year that we just want to take you through. So have a look at this. Absolutely fantastic. And one thing of knowing if your brand is relevant, if you have a story that is worth telling, is to look at what sort of engagement these influencers are creating when they're using your products. Usually, of course, as you can imagine, if they do their own content that no one is supporting or paying for, it might be a higher engagement. That's usually the case, actually. What we have seen during our test this first 3-4 months of the year is that if we pick the right influencers, we allow them to use our products with little guidance, but not too much. So we allow them to be good at what they're good at. Actually, our branded content with them has even higher engagement. And I think that really tells us that the story that we are sitting on is really worth telling. People want to hear more. People want to train to live. They want to understand, hey, what can I do so I can become better? And I think that's super, super relevant, of course, together with, of course, having the right ambassadors. But in an essence, just like we look at our own staff. So, of course, the whole idea with Björn Borg is to create an environment where I can be my best version. And that's also how we look at all our partners. So, for example, with influencers, I think it's super important just to understand that they're all different. And they're good at different things. And of course, you want to make sure that you allow them, enough freedom so they can really, fulfill their own potential. So for us, we have, one portion that is mostly focusing on reach and engagement. We have, some that is creating content that is just simply extraordinarily good at creating content that is even, better than what we can create. And of course, we have those that are super good in driving sales, conversion. And of course, all influencers are doing a bit of everything. But for us, I think it's crucial to nail down and understand, hey, which of these can really lift our brand to a completely new level? And that's how we have sort of structured our influencer approach around these three. And the question, of course, is this really working then? And for us, it's absolutely working. So looking at our development as a brand, and what you see here is purchase intention. So simply what we do is that we ask a couple of hundred consumers in all our mature markets every week, every month, every year, a number of different questions, just to make sure that the stuff that we're doing is actually working, that we get some return of all that money that we're spending. And in terms of purchase intention, it's really all about asking the consumers, how likely are you to purchase from the brands that you are seeing here on this list? So that's one way of driving, of course, the desirability, making sure that people really want what we're creating here. And since we've sort of launched the influencer attack that we started about a year ago, but really during the last 3-4 months really sort of kicked off, we can clearly see that we are making massive inroads here on a positive trend. So here what you can see is on the top, you have Nike, of course, being a very global player. Second one is Adidas, and third one is Puma. But then number 4 is Björn Borg. So a small Swedish sports apparel brand is number 4. So ahead of Reebok, ahead of Lululemon, ahead of Under Armour, ahead of Stronger, ahead of a lot of different brands, which tells us, of course, that there is a want out there from the consumer to buy our stuff. We need to make sure that we package the stuff in the right way so we can reach out to those. And here, of course, our biggest challenge is distribution. We're just not distributed well enough when it comes to our sports apparel, because we have the need and also we have the tools to bring the collection across together with our influencers. The influencer approach is also super important to continue to drive our online shift. So in 2018, as we've spoke about many times before, we've decided to move Björn Borg, from being a traditional wholesaler, selling into wholesale partners, to moving the whole brand into an online environment. So not only in terms of communication and building the brand and influencer, but also in terms of generating sales. And the reason for that is that one of the challenges that we're having, and as you can imagine, we walk into a physical store and we have a completely new collection. If they want to bring us in, they need to throw someone else out. However, if you're an e-tailer or if you have a marketplace, there is no space limitations. You can always add something new. And since we know that the consumer wants to buy our stuff, that's really been a clear success for us to drive revenue and growth. And we can see that, from 15, 16% just a few years back, when we closed Q1, 46% of our revenue is coming from e-tailers and our own e-com and marketplaces. And if I would add what our traditional wholesalers are selling on their own e-com, like stadium.com or buyandcoff.com, more than 60% of our revenue in Q1 is only in different digital platforms. And of course, this requires us also to heavily invest into influencers, TikTok and social media channels, because that's where the consumers are. And it's working out really, really well for us. What we can also see is then when we're pushing certain products where we're influencers, it's really sort of flying out from our e-com store. So the numbers you see on the grid here is last year's him apparel sales versus this year's him apparel sales on our own e-com site only. And we can see, of course, that we were growing 108% during February. In March, we grew 162% on men's apparel. And on women, the growth is even up to 200-300% versus last year. So it's clear that there's a strong correlation between the influencers you use, what product they're presenting, and also our sales in our direct-to-consumer channels. So another evidence that the stuff is actually working really, really well. And of course, last, and I think you saw this already, but when we closed Q1, we can really see that the brand is on fire. So net sales is growing at 7.4%, but if we take out currency implications, we're growing actually 14%. And of course, you should remember then that own retail in that quarter is declining 44%. So you can't imagine the online momentum that the brand is currently having. Gross margin is well maintained. We're reducing our operating expenses because it's much more efficient driving direct-to-consumer business and driving an online proposition, which of course is leading to a record high EBIT at 12.1%. Absolutely fantastic. Very, very good operating margin for our quarter one. And of course, we believe that a strong brand will be needed, next year and 3 years and probably 10 years from now. We also believe that the world needs a strong sports fashion brand that is really inspiring you to become your own best version. And we believe that Björn Borg could be that brand. But one thing that will change, that's the way you communicate, the way you package your stories, the way you bring them to market. And it goes very, very quick. So what was right a year ago is no longer working. What is working right now might not work a year from now. And in order to be quick and adopt and be receptive to all these changes, you need to have a strong team. So I'll finish off where I started. The whole idea with Björn Borg is to build a brand inside out, to create a working environment where everyone allows to become the best version of themselves. Because we know it's the team that needs to do all these changes. And our biggest assets, and one of the two things that makes us truly unique, is those that are working for Björn Borg. We simply need to make sure that they will become their own best version. If they do that, then we'll be ready for any change that will come upon us. And of course, the second one that makes us unique is Björn Borg, the brand. And those are really our two biggest assets. The brand, fuel that with relevant stories, and of course, invest into the team so you have the best team that you can possibly get. And combine the two, and we're on our way to become the #1 sports fashion brand for people who want to feel active and attractive. And right now, the clear way to get that is to focus online, in marketplaces, e-tailers, own e-com, but also redirect all our communication into social channels where influencers and ambassadors is a crucial role in enabling us to justify this growth path that we have set upon us. So with that said, thank you for having me here, Hjalmar. It's always good to be here. If you have any questions, I think we have a bit of time for that as well. But that's really, it for me. So thank you. And by the way, It's only early in the day, so don't forget to work out today as well. Yes. Hjalmar,
thank you so much. Very interesting presentation. I have some questions, and also we have been receiving some questions from our viewers. But I think we will start off with some questions regarding marketing. I mean, you've been pretty quick to adapt to this influencer marketing way of doing things. How do you keep up with the trends, and how will you move quick to detect the next trend in the segment?
No, and I think that it comes down again to the team. So of course we have a fantastic marketing team in place, and many of them of course are quite new into the organization, also very, very young, and of course most of them is actually in the consumers themselves. So I think it's about creating a team that understand what is relevant right now, and I think that's of course the job as a leader. I think probably comes down to two things. You need to make sure that everybody knows where we're going. And second, of course, you need to make sure you create an environment so you can attract, really, really talented people. And that's really, that's the magical formula. So I think the reason why we've been so quick in refocusing is because we have a very, very strong marketing team in place that understand that this is really the name of the game.
Yes, okay. If we look at the Swedish clothing market, the current state of it, I mean, we've recently seen some reports from the branch data that says that the growth, albeit from very weak comparables, but there's a growth of about 18%. Meanwhile, the second quarter is typically a very weak quarter historically for the market. How would you say, what is the current state of the Swedish clothing market?
Well, I think, of course, if you compare versus last year's numbers, of course, I think for many brands it will be easy to beat them. But I guess if you look in general, I think what we see at least is this desire to come out and to meet people, but actually also to visit physical stores and start buying things. So if I just look at our own retail portfolio, of course, we're growing at a tremendous pace. But partly, of course, because last year's comparable number was very, very low, but also because people really want to get out to meet people. So what we see is a high hope that there will be a continued quite strong growth in the market if you're talking sort of sports and sports apparel, because we also see that this trend around training and healthy lifestyle is going to continue. However, I think for those that are predominantly focused on fashion and aesthetics, I think that's going to be also quite a challenging year. And of course, on top of that, we don't really know exactly how it will look when people are getting back to work. But I'm assuming at least that's going to be our way forward, that we're not going to go back to what it was before the whole pandemic, but rather to maintain this quite high flexibility so individuals can choose themselves where they would want to work. And of course, that will also have an implication in terms of what you're buying. You simply need less suits if you're not spending every day in the office. And if you're going to train more, of course, you need more training stuff. And so I think the trend is, at least in terms of what we're doing, it looks very, very promising.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And if we look forward, I mean, you have set this growth target that you set in 2019. If we look at the individual segments, you have the sports brand, and then you have the traditional underwear segment. How would they combine, and how would they contribute to the overall growth target that you have set?
No, but I think since the clear plan, if we look at categories, is that sports apparel, both women and men, and performance and leisure wear should be the sort of clear growth driver. That's where we want to grow. However, of course, we want to maintain our number one position as an underwear brand. So we will, of course, continue to focus and invest into our underwear, collection as well. But I think the growth ambitions there are, 3-4% a year, because we're already a market leader. And that's a bit of a different approach, of course, because we believe that in order to get the underwear to grow even further, well, then we need to look into new channels and also new countries. But of course, here, given Amazon and of course these different marketplaces, you don't really need to open up a new market. You can actually open up a new account, and all of a sudden you can reach the whole world. So of course here we have a very, very strong partnership with Amazon, and also of course we just recruited Emily, so she's relocated from China, just moved to Sweden, and she's been working with Amazon for 10 years. So I'm putting a lot of hopes into her to figure out how we can sort of crack the whole Amazon as one of our probably most important channels going forward. But in terms of growth, it's clear that apparel will be the growth driver. And of course, in terms of underwear, we want to maintain that, and of course, make sure that we continue to be market leaders. And one thing that we've seen is, even though, of course, the last 3 years, almost all of our communication has been around sports apparel, the underwear position actually also getting stronger and stronger. So it's quite a lot of spread for both categories when you're focusing on building a strong brand.
Mm. All right, thank you. And finally, we will address one question that we received from a viewer. And if we look internationally, you had naturally some COVID-related problems in the Benelux region. Could you elaborate a bit on the current state of that region and your business?
Absolutely. So we took over Benelux from a distributor in 2017, and since then, of course, we've restructured it. So we've closed down a local warehouse. We closed down the local offices. We've done some team efficiency exercises, and I think when we came into 2020, I think we had the right team in place. I did the last change in August 2020, so we put a new general manager in place that we recruited from Adidas, and he's done a super good job so far. And we see sort of a good momentum on both Netherlands and Belgium. Netherlands, quite similar to Sweden, is also a very strong, online market. They have, for example, bol.com, which is, is a marketplace that is really leading the development there, and we have a very, very good business with them. Amazon is also really, really strong in Netherlands, and also Zalando. So when I look at past performance in Q1, we're doing very, very good in Netherlands and also Belgium. And that, of course, that's a high focus for us because, we used to be much, much bigger in the past, and it took some time to get our heads around, our approach into that market. But with a new leader on board with Erik, I think we have the team in place to make sure that Netherlands and Belgium will be a growth engine for us going forward.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Henrik.
Thank you, Hjalmar. Thank you for listening, guys. And don't forget to train, huh?